This video presents Pyholmes, a prototype tool that helps Python developers find the root causes of failing tests in both traditional shallow software and deep neural networks. Given a failing unit test, Pyholmes presents to the developer a set of slight alterations to their original failing input, which would change the test result from a failure to a pass. By observing the differences between the original test input and the altered input provided by Pyholmes, a developer can more easily identify what about their input caused the program to fail. In traditional shallow software, this approach could help developers identify faulty code more quickly. In deep neural networks, Pyholmes could help developers identify gaps in their training datasets. Pyholmes can help developers find the root causes of failing tests in shallow programs, such as revealing to a developer that their function fails to handle strings containing apostrophes. In deep learning contexts, it can reveal which dimensions of an input caused a failure. This can provide a developer with valuable clues for what new samples to include in their training dataset. Pyholmes follows the same strategy for deep and shallow software, just with different implementations. The strategy is as follows. First, make small changes to the original failing input in order to find similar inputs that pass. Second, filter for the inputs among these that are processed by the program under test as similarly to the original input as possible. This process finds passing inputs that are similar in both value and behavior to the original. By observing the difference between these inputs and the original, the developer can infer why their original input caused a failure. Depending on whether the program under test is a traditional shallow program or a deep neural network, Pyholmes uses one of two implementations. If the program under test is a traditional shallow program, similar input values are found by applying random fuzzing to the original input. Next, those inputs are filtered for similar behavior by comparing the execution paths they produce with the execution path produced by the original input. If instead the program under test is a deep neural network, similar input values are found by adjusting the original input down the loss gradient with respect to that input. This process is identical to adversarial sample generation, except Pyholmes descends the loss gradient instead of ascending it. Next, those inputs are filtered for similar behavior by comparing the neuron activations they produce in the final embedding layer with those caused by the original input. Now we'll discuss how to use Pyholmes for a deep neural network. First, the user writes a unit test which contains some required variables, such as the original failing input tensor and the valid range of values for the elements of that tensor. All these variables are discussed in depth in our artifacts README. Now, the user calls Pyholmes from the command line. CLI flags for Pyholmes are also discussed in our artifacts README. Now, Pyholmes presents a report like this for each of the three passing and failing inputs that elicited the most similar neuron activation in the final embedding layer. For brevity, this slide shows only one passing input. Pyholmes shows the model's loss on the original failing input, whether this new input provided by Pyholmes passed or failed, the model's loss on this new input, the difference in activation of the final embedding layer between the original input and this one, and the value of the new input tensor. Suppose a user has trained a fully connected neural network on the MNIST database of handwritten digits. This is a multi-class classification task where each input is a grayscale image of a handwritten digit, and an image's label specifies which of the 10 digits it is. The user creates a Jupyter notebook that runs their model on a validation dataset and uses Pyholmes to explain any mistakes. The entirety of this notebook can be found in our artifact as mnist_demo.ipynb. Here is the part of the notebook that calls Pyholmes. Anytime a failing input is discovered, the notebook automatically writes a unit test that Pyholmes can be called on, and then calls Pyholmes to explain the failure. To visualize the output tensors, the notebook parses them from Pyholmes' text output and plots them with matplotlib, along with another image showing the difference between the original and the variant. Let's look at the results for this handwritten 5, which the model originally misclassified as a 3. These difference images reveal the cause of the failure. The user's model over-relies on 5s that overlap with the red areas of the plots. The user can now make their model more versatile by adding to the dataset 5s that look similar to this one and also avoid densely red areas. Thanks to Pyholmes, a user can rapidly obtain clues about why a test fails, allowing them to debug the issue it uncovered more quickly.